Welcome back to Analytical Strategy and what looks to be the penultimate episode of Australian Survivor in episode 21. So the urns are finally out of play, and it is every man and woman for themselves to make the best move they can to try and solidify their spot in the final two, and to have that chance to be this season's sole survivor. So the episode kicks off reflecting on the previous tribal, and George brings up a very good point, stating Kara's paranoia of playing her idol wasn't so bad in the circumstance of actually losing the idol, but it is a bad move in the sense of Hayley and Wei didn't know about it at all, so therefore the secret of the idol could break the core four apart, as those two could lose trust in George and Kara. It is in a sense saying to Hayley and Wei that they didn't have full confidence in them to both vote the same way as George and Kara last to vote, so they just had to play their idol just to be sure. So this play is also great news for Danny and Flick, who at the Waterwell were still firmly on the plan of swinging Hayley and Wei across over to their side to have yet another crack at this game's power duo. It was funny, even though Flick was saved by the urns, you could tell by her tone of her voice she even thought the urns was a little bit of a crappy twist, being like, well now the urns are out of play, we might have a chance to actually pull them over. So on the surface the gameplay should be pretty similar to last episode, with George and Kara on one side, Danny and Flick on the other, and Hayley and Wei in the middle between the two, having all the power on which side to go with. So the reward challenge this episode was a big one, for a nice overnight spa recharge and reboot reward, where we saw King George, aka the king of giving up in challenges, work on his tan rather than compete yet again, which again was pretty disappointing to see. In the end, it looked as though it would have been a bit of a battle between Hayley and Flick, but Danny came from behind, and given it was another shooting contest at the end, she flew past them both and got it done for the win. However, she still decided to bring both of those contestants on the reward with her in Hayley and Flick, with Hayley being the key to making her next big move happen. I personally would have liked to see Danny bring both Hayley and Wei with her on this reward to really show how much she needed them both. But we all knew the Flick was going to be her first choice when she did get the win. This was definitely the reward of the season so far, with a bed, food, cleaning products, a jacuzzi, drinks, breakfast the next morning. It really had it all. So Flick and Danny obviously worked on Hayley throughout this reward to try and bring her over to their side, and Hayley is going to weigh up her options, but we'll see how it all plays out as the episode goes on. She's going to tell Danny and Flick obviously that she's in, as of course she should, but that doesn't mean she's definitely going to align with them, and we'll have to see how everything plays out prior to the next tribal council. But back at camp, we saw George start to grow worried about the idea of Hayley flipping over with the girls at this overnight reward, and he's needing to implement a plan B in the case that this happens, which of course was going to find Kara's replanted idol. Hang on, winning individual immunity? The man's backup plan is winning a challenge. Recently we haven't even seen him compete in challenges, let alone win them, so this should be a sight to see. However, in saying this immunity challenge was one of the first we've seen this season with a puzzle portion at the end of the challenge, which may even it up for the likes of Kara, George and Wei if they can make it to that portion of the challenge. Now, especially with word puzzles, as we have seen in other seasons of Survivor, these can take so bloody long to complete. And in one of the biggest come from behind wins ever, Wei got to that puzzle and she absolutely blitzed it. It was absolutely phenomenal to see. And you could tell she knew she was going to be able to finish it quickly once she got there. You could see the determination in her eyes once she got to that portion of the challenge. We saw from all the other contestants that were there, they did have the majority of the words in their winning phrase. But Wei just came in from behind and bam, put down that guaranteed spot in the final five to get it done and get the win. George's plan B has ultimately failed, and unless an idol is found, Hayley and Wei will have the power on who will go home at Tribal Council. So back at camp after the challenge, Wei is looking to obtain a 3-2 majority when the final five comes around, and as long as she is with Hayley, that is the most important thing to her. So although all this power couple talk regarding George and Kara is going around the game, let's be real, there's 3 core couples in this game at the moment. There is Hayley and Wei, there's George and Kara, and there's Flick and Danny. It's whichever 2 of those 3 couples come together that will ultimately be the ones that stay alive in this game. So Flick and Danny's plan, especially after seeing Kara play that idol last Tribal Council, is to have a 2-2-2 split, with 2 votes on George and 2 on Kara, so that on the revote, one of them is guaranteed to go home. However, funnily enough, George has the exact same plan, wanting to put 2 on Flick and 2 on Danny, taking Danny out on the revote. So Hayley has all the power in which way she wants to go, and is telling both sides exactly what they want to hear. So after a mad scramble for the hidden immunity idol, Flick in the end is the lucky one to find it, beating George and Kara at their own game. Now technically, with these 2 plans in place of both sides wanting a 2-2-2 split, this idol shouldn't mean too much for this vote in particular. George's side was targeting Danny, so it just depends if Flick plays the idol, and if so, who Flick plays it on, which will determine which of the 2 Brawn members will go home. And Danny and Flick will still have George firmly in their firing line if the vote goes in their favour. So regardless of who found the idol, Hayley and Wade will still have all the power for this vote, and will decide on which way to go and who will go home. So the idol may come into play later on in the season. One move I expected George to potentially try, given he did seem genuinely worried this episode, is the old let's target the person in the middle strategy. He could have spoken to Danny and Flick and be like, look, Hayley and Wei have all the control here. Let's join forces and take Hayley out of this game for good. I think that's honestly the move that makes the most sense for all 4 of those contestants left in the game, rather than trusting and relying on Hayley, who has been known for flipping between alliances throughout the entirety of the game and has been so dangerous for doing so. Danny could have also lied to Hayley and said George approached her with that particular game plan in mind, as he felt in danger at this upcoming vote, which I think is also an extremely believable lie as well, which may have just worked for Danny. I think either of those plays would have been epic to see, but as neither side tested those as possibilities, Hayley continues to have all the power in this game and at this vote. So at Tribal Council we did have some very interesting discussions. So we had Kara openly call Hayley a flipper, which generally would not go down too well, especially if you were trying to keep that person on your side. But luckily for her, Hayley owned this as part of her game. We also saw Flick call out George for giving up in challenges and not competing to the best of his ability, failing in the outplay portion of the game. And we also saw George almost look defeated at this tribal, and not really try as hard as he usually would to persuade his people to stay strong until the end. But as mentioned multiple times already, there was really only one thing that mattered. Who will Hayley and Wei vote for? What is the best decision for them moving forward in the game? So, the initial vote was a 2-2-2 tie, and it was between Danny, Flick and Kara, with the Bankstown cockroach escaping the vote yet again. Now on the revote, Danny was the one sent packing, with Flick being the last remaining Brawn left in the game. So firstly, it was definitely the right move for Flick to not play her idol if she was happy for Danny to be the one to go home as collateral. She is safe for one more vote at the final 5 regardless of what the Brains want to do. But I also think she could be the middleman in between the last remaining 2 groups of 2, so she may have a lot of pull in which way she wants to go. So the only person that's guaranteed to be in that final 4 at the moment is Flick. And if she gets to the end of the game with that particular jury, man, she has a huge chance of winning this season. Secondly, was this the right move for Hayley? In my mind, absolutely yes it was. If George was sent home this episode, Danny and Flick would have gotten all the power in this game. Kara would have felt betrayed, potentially joined Danny and Flick, and Hayley could have been in a lot of trouble. Also from a challenge standpoint, Danny was easily the biggest threat in the game other than Hayley. I mean sure, Wei won an immunity tonight and that was awesome to see, but we also saw the 3 people clearly at the back of this challenge, and really most challenges, and they are Wei, George and Kara. So obviously with Flick now being guaranteed to be in that final 4, it can no longer happen, but if Hayley was at the end with the other 3 brains, it's basically a wrap, it's game over, and getting rid of Danny makes that one step closer to happening. I also saw this move relate to Wei's thought process, saying she wanted to form a tight 3 out of that final 5, and now that Flick is a free vote, maybe that might be easier to happen with Danny out of the game. So it was sad to see Danny go, but with one more episode down, it looks as though the finale will be this Sunday night, and my final predictions are: George will come in 5th place, Flick will come in 4th, Kara 3rd, leaving Hayley and Wei in the final 2, with Hayley taking out the prize of this season. It will hopefully be an epic battle all the way to the very end, and will conclude what has been a very topsy-turvy season of Survivor. I look forward to it coming to a close, bringing you my final recap before US Survivor starts up in a few short weeks. Thanks again to each and every one of you for listening, and being on this crazy ride with me. This is Analytical Strategy signing out once again, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.